Fine. You want the gory details? I'll give you the gory details.
What's up, guys? I'm GamerMD83, and I'm joined by very special people here. This is Matt Rhodes. He's lead concept artist at Bioware. Mary Kirby. This is Varrick's writer, among a bunch of other awesome characters. And John Epler, lead narrative designer. They've been awesome enough to talk about the making of Varric, our favorite dwarf, our favorite beardless dwarf with the awesome chest hair. First of all, would you guys mind telling us what you guys did particularly for Varric's concept and for making Varric?
Sure. I was lead concept artist on Dragon Age 2 at the time, and so I drew the early versions of Varric, and that was basically all I did.
I don't remember exactly when I got the first concept for Varric. I kind of think initially I got an email from David Gator, our lead writer. It was just a list of characters that were going to be followers. Mm-hmm. And I think I picked Varric based entirely on, he was the guy who was going to narrate the framed narrative.
Totally.
And I really liked the idea of writing the writer of the game.
That is really, really cool. A really cool concept.
And then I think I got the actual concept after that.
Probably, yeah.
Oh, so it just said narrator.
Yeah.
This is the narrator. Oh, wow.
Maybe I knew he was a dwarf, and that was it.
And then I just joined in. I was the cinematic designer for Varric on Dragon Age 2, and then through the Inquisition. So Dragon Age 2 was kind of my first real project as a cinematic designer. I was in QA before then, and we were basically given the choice of which followers do you want to work on. And I saw Varric. I'm like, well, this guy sounds pretty cool. He's a dwarf, and who doesn't like dwarves? But also, the sense of humor, the fact that he's the way I would describe when I was reading up on Varric, I felt like he's the person that your parents would want you to be friends with, because he'd let you indulge a little bit of that going crazy, but then he'd also be like, okay, but you know what, let's take a step back. Let's not steal the car and drive it off to California. You can get drunk, but that's as far as we're going. And so it's like, yeah, he lets you kind of live a little bit of the crazy stuff, but he's also got kind of that more responsible, like he understands the responsibilities too, so.
Yeah, he raises the volume and then turns you down a little.
He's good at someday.
Yes, that's right.
So, John, with what you do, you take what Mary and Matt do, and then put it into the actual game, like actually animate him, or
sort of. So what we do, what cinematic design did on, especially on Dragon Age 2 and Inquisition, is we'll take the writing, we'll take the level art, the character art, and then we'll put them together in a scene. So Mary will write something, we'll sit down, she'll write it, I'll look at it with her, make some suggestions based on, okay, I can do this without this a different way, because I have, I can sell it with a look, I can sell it with an animation here. And then once that's done, we'll go into it, we'll build the scenes in game, then I'll run them past Mary and say, hey, how do you like this? Does this kind of hit what you're thinking of? And then we'll iterate on that. So it's taking a lot of what other people have done and just putting it together into one complete package is basically the way I'd put it.
I see.
Which is nice. It's nice because sometimes you get a lot more freedom than others. Like my favorite scene, the scene on Dragon Age 2, I left till the very end of the game. It was my reward for everything else I had done was the frame narrative. That's the one where you go back to Bartran's mansion and the whole showdown. And I remember talking to character art, but I wanted them like, can you give me like the two eyes on either side of the screen, like the very West kind of anime thing where they're both staring at each other, and then you get the hand doing the rod and fire. And sadly, I didn't get that, but I got a lot of what I wanted to get into that scene.
Improvised letterboxing
yes.
So that you can do.
Oh yeah, Yeah, that's one of my favorite scenes also in Dragon Age 2.
So much fun to build because there are constraints on what I can do. It's like, oh, this isn't the world. This is like, no. This is the one time you can go absolutely crazy, and I embrace that to its fullest. So
I didn't know what was going on. I was like.
Varric. Please forgive me, my brother. I was just jealous of you. How could I ever compete with you for Mother's love?
You're strong and handsome, and so very smart. What?
Why lie now about this? What have you to gain?
What do you want from me? I broke in, I found my brother, and it was awkward. Family business.
No. I think there's more to it.
Fine.
So, to fans, Varric is so many things, but looking at him as a developer, or as a creator, in 1 or 2 words, how would you describe your experience in creating or portraying Varric? This is for all 3 of you.
What comes to mind for me immediately is natural. Varric wasn't a fight. There wasn't a struggle to bring Varric to life. So it just felt very natural. He was a character that fit the world.
Interesting.
He very early on had his own voice, and you just sort of, even when, like for me, when drawing him, it was like he already existed. You kind of needed, sort of needed to move the lines around until they matched. I don't know.
You immediately saw him, like when you were drawing him, you immediately knew what he was going to look like.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Oh man. Use your words.
I know.
Why'd you do it first?
Damn it.
I just totally cheated and ignored it. I just used the one word and then followed it up.
There you go.
I don't know. I think for me, for Varric, starting in DA2 and continuing to Inquisition, he was the only sane person in the room.
Yes.
Everything is on fire, and he's the only person who's aware that everything's on fire.
That's true. That is a good way of explaining him.
Actually, to kind of jump off Mary's, is aware. He is aware of what's going on. He's aware of the. He's the one person you know is always 100% aware of the stakes, even if he doesn't always take that information and use it for the best purposes. He knows what the stakes are at any one time.
You know, this maybe sounds a bit weird and like quasi-philosophical, but like I feel like the more I understand about stories, the more I understand about life. And so Varric, in a sense, because he understands stories, he's like, I get this bad guy antagonist. This is the get through here, but then it'll all turn out alright. Like he has that perspective on things.
Well, what I like about that too, though, is when he does lose that feeling, like in Inquisition, when he does starts. I mean, the spoilers. I think at this point. But if you make the awful choice in the Fade, actually I guess it's only awful depending on who you brought with you, but you make that choice in the Fade, you can see that's where Varric he doesn't know how the story turns out anymore.
It's like a very traditional writer meeting his Coen brothers moment.
Yes, exactly.
Like way too Coen brothers for him.
Yep. Everything was simple, easy, and you can figure out the path right up until then, and then you just feel him getting thrown. And that, I think, is nice because it also worked kind of as a... It's Varric is the player in a lot of ways. Varric is as a player, you know these conceits, you know these narrative things, and then when we throw something else at you, when something else happens, you get thrown out of it, and so does Varric. And Varric's just like, whoa, hold on a second, that was never supposed to happen. So
yeah,
he's very genre savvy,
yeah,
and I know I have lampshaded that occasionally. But yeah, there are moments in Inquisition where it's clear he's suddenly stumbled into a postmodern novel and has no idea what's just happening.
It's all just a bunch of different genres. That's life right there. As a player, I always want to have Varric in my party because I feel like I always turn to Varric to see what he's gonna say. Because sometimes when I'm like, "What is going on?" he'll like throw out a little thing, and you're like, "Okay, it's cool." If you remember, how did the concept of Varric start?
It started with, as most of these did at the time, with Mike Laidlaw coming in and explaining this idea. And the idea of being this bombastic, sort of theatrical, the narrator character. But as he was describing him and telling the stories, Mike and I worked in the same office for a while on a project that never got released, and we established story time with Mike. And he did that on Dragon Age 2 and he did that on Inquisition, where as the story was being developed, we would sit down with him and he'd basically almost sit on the carpet and he'd tell us the story of the game so far. And And so even thinking the first drawings, it's actually that the first drawing of him that we didn't actually even do that many. We basically did like 1 or 2, and that was it. The pose that he's in is a Mike Laidlaw storytelling pose.
Aww.
Just sort of felt like the natural thing because essentially Varric was Mike Laidlaw. Like he was telling the story of the game to us, and that it just was very like it just all kind of came together like that. And then just again, they're trying to just with concept art, especially with character design, I feel like you're trying to let players be Sherlock Holmes in a really good way. Like what Sherlock Holmes does in a crazy way, you almost want to do a simplified version of that, so you can look at a character and see different pieces, and you realize you're putting the story and the character of that person together. So with Varric, it was just the bravado and the casual flairness of like the open shirt and the which it's really funny because I didn't even think of like, well, open shirt, he's a dwarf, he doesn't have a beard, so like his hair is and the fact that chest hair became a thing was like but like even just like the beardlessness, that side of things, like it was a dwarf that had completely rejected and was totally comfortable with his rejection of all things dwarven. And the beard is like the symbol of dwarvenness, so to remove it, it was just like, this is a guy, like, that would almost typically be an act of shame, but he wears it with pride.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think that really helped.
What I like about that too is that, there's an easy trope to fall into there where it's, he rejected his dwarfiness, and over the course of the story, he becomes more comfortable, he grows his beard back, because now he's a dwarf, but he understands it. But I like what Varric is who Varric is. Varric is a character who is completely comfortable with who he is, and I think it's nice. It's always nice to see that in the story because that often it's so easy to play the other side of that as an easy trope, but a character who just knows who he is.
Yeah.
It's a great place for the player to feel themselves in the story.
I think actually with the beard, I think Luke Christensen sent me a link. And he said, "Hey, look, somebody figured out a mod to give Varric his beard back."
Oh no!
What? It's just like, why would you do that? That's not Varric at all. Why? Oh man, I remember going on. I ran to his office and we just
It's funny that you said the Mike Laidlaw pose thing because the iconic concept art of him was him doing the Mike in the middle of the story pose. Yeah. But the other piece of concept art that I got from him right away was him in the chair talking to Sandra.
Yeah.
And Varric's pose in the chair with his hands like this. This is Mike's. I'm going to tell you how I'm going to change everything that you've been working on for the last couple of weeks.
That's Mike's white box.
Oh my god.
That's Mike's white box review.
That's so cool.
He's in the pose.
Yeah.
We all inwardly cringe. And the writers, but the second he does that,
So would you say that he's based off of Mike Laidlaw?
Not personality.
Or it's just a coincidence, a beautiful coincidence.
Watching the stream right now.
Mike is watching this right now.
He's like,
I would say, at least from my end, there's 5 to 10% of it.
Personality-wise, when I started to work on him, my goal was anti-Ogren, or like
the complete opposite.
We'd already gone to Orzammar in Origins, and we'd seen a lot of traditional dwarves from Orzammar, and I wanted to know what are surface dwarves like. And we hadn't really done anything with them, so I had to invent them on the spot.
Yeah.
Very cool.
So Varric is the most surface dwarf.
Yeah. And that informed us too, because even additionally with his costume, it was really easy because it was trying to basically dress him as human as possible. Yeah. Like there's not a dwarfy thing on him. It was just like,
yeah.
Well, even the way that actually kind of into his animation side of things, the way you animate a character like that is very different. A traditional dwarf, there's a lot of more closed-off body language. They're a very closed society. Arms crossed, a lot of standing back. Varric is very expansive and bombastic, and he talks. He's a hand talker, and I mean, we all know people who are very big hand talkers. Aside from Mike, we know other hand talkers. It's such a Varric thing that it's something that we carried into Inquisition because that's how that character speaks, and it's so different from what an Orzammar dwarf talks like. Orzammar dwarves are always, very hunched in, they're very contained, they're very much about their own personal space. And then you get this guy who's been on the surface his entire life, and he's just like, I tell stories. I tell stories with my hand. This is how I act.
Yeah.
I love it.
It seems like Varric was our Athena. He just sprung from the mind of Zeus and fully formed, and there he is. And he's been on a rock for 2 games now. Like yeah.
I mean, I think he is different in Inquisition than he was in DA2. Because, well, DA2, everything is falling apart the entire game. And he's telling the story of how it all fell apart. And it actually isn't Hawk's fault. Yeah. And Inquisition, everything is already fallen apart, and now it's actually somehow hit an even further hole and like rolled along the bottom. And for Varric, that's his fault specifically. Like he sees every single thing that goes wrong in Inquisition as his fault.
Yeah.
So he's in a much darker place.
Yeah, that's true. I felt bad because I wanted to be Varric's best friend, because it's like, no, well, I'm your best friend, you know. But then you would, as the Inquisitor, you had to remember that you're someone new to Varric, you know, and he never really warmed up to you as much as, say, with Hawk. Like, he was always like, well, I don't feel comfortable with you, and it was like, aw. But I liked that.
His relationship with you was different from that with Hawk. Like, Hawk's relationship is, like you said, they're best friends. Whereas as the Inquisitor, he sees you as the person who needs to save the world. And I mean, I think there's a certain amount, it's hard for a character like Varric to really become best friends with someone like that, because you're almost a story by yourself. You're larger than life. You're this character I mean, whether you embrace it or it's just thrust upon you, you have to fulfill this role. So, and I mean, just showing that, like, there's a lot. The one time you can hug Varric, that's one of the reasons why we fought hard to get that in. That was one of those things that came up. It's like, okay, well, now you've got 8 so basically you have 8 different sizes to accommodate, because male and female of all the races. And then we decided, no, this needs to go in, because this is the moment where you actually get that moment of humanity with Varric, where Varric realizes that you're not just this almost Arthurian figure of legend. You are an actual person, and even if you fully embrace your role as the Inquisitor, you're still a person, and you still need friendship. And that's why I love the fact that you get the card game with Varric, because that's kind of Varric's moment of, okay, yeah, you know what, I acknowledge that you're not just here to stop the tide of darkness. You sometimes need to be a person too. And I think that affects Varric, and that affected how I, built his scenes, and I think that probably affects how you wrote him too. Yeah. So.
I was gonna ask that. I was gonna say, who's responsible for the Varric hug? Yay! Thank you.
And I made sure that happened.
Yes,
so
that was a challenge.
That was, and I think actually it was funny, because basically a week before we were completely locked out, I went back to that scene, and something had changed in one of the animations, and now the player was walking past Varric and hugging empty air, and it just made the whole thing so much sadder, because it's like, you just burned Varric. You're like, no. You see a single tear trickle down his cheek.
It's like, oh, you just ran over.
But actually, the hug is a great example. That's to me one of the most satisfying and hardest emotions to pull off. Is not really. It's not necessarily sad, just genuinely touching and emotional. And that's tricky. That's tricky to pull off. Even just like the little details in how his expressions, because he's always so. He's either happy or sarcastic, but right when he says, "Where's Hawk?" and he says it again, "Where's Hawk?" and he walks off, and he kind of does that turn behind him where he looks, and you just see like he's gonna break apart, and I was like, oh my god, that little detail was just so perfect. It was like, oh, it's not one of my favorite things to do, but just to experience that emotion. Is there anything you guys would have wanted to add to Varric that never came to be? More framed narrative.
That was a very carefully worded question.
Throughout DA2, I really wanted to do a fake death scene, like the start of his personal plot. I wanted to do a scene where somehow in the middle of one of the quests he dies, and there's this overly melodramatic scene with Hawk, no, Varric, and he dies in Hawk's arm. Just to cut back to Cassandra going,
you died, huh? Oh, that would have been brilliant.
I think I would have. I mean, just there were the realities of production at the time. That even through Inquisition, we could give him some outfits that were a bit more practical. Just for who he is, I would have loved to give him a whole arrangement of casual wear because he just seems like the kind of guy who he just has all kinds of really great stuff and he loves to show it off. And he's just that kind of guy. I think that was part of it. Part of the fun too was saying like again, Varric the anti-dwarf. Dwarves are always so shelled up. It's like they know a rock's gonna fall on them at any moment. Because Varric is just so light. It just would have been nice to have him like just pick up a bunch of our Legion stuff. It's just like I know it's not. It just feels so good.
Just casually like, oh yeah, I got this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like every scene, it's a different outfit.
He's wearing something different.
At least one where he's just sitting there with his feet up, like in the
Yeah.
And it's just an entire scene of you looking at him looking at you, and then you looking back at him, and then come back to gameplay.
We know Varric ends up as Viscount from Trespasser. To me personally, I feel like that would just be temporarily. Like he would probably end up doing something. He'd probably get tired of it or something. How would you guys see Varric's future?
I think Varric's future honestly depends on the world's future because Varric is a storyteller. Varric is a person who, but at his heart, he is a good person. Like he's a genuinely good person who wants to take responsibility. So I think it's a hard question to answer without actually answering what is the world's future. And I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that in a way it almost seems like Varric has gone from being like a novelist, just someone who pumps out, fiction in his kind of his spare time. Well, he's a merchant, so wealthy, but so kind of a novelist. But the more and more he's let himself get wrapped up in these lives, like he's kind of becoming a little bit more of a reporter, a little bit. Like what he writes of the Inquisition made, what Cassandra's it's still highly, flourished and colorful, but it seems like it's a little bit more truthful than what he wrote in DA2.
You think he's going to start a newspaper publishing?
It almost seems like yeah. Or at least to become like either that or like propagandist almost in a way, like trying to use his writing to affect change in the world. I don't know.
That'd be cool. The Tethras report. Okay, this question is for Mary. Varric is a strong character on his own, but when he truly shines is when he's interacting with other companions. He tends to be everyone's friend, but in different ways, except for Sebastian. Is this established early on, or does it start to form naturally throughout banter sessions?
So early on, before we do the banters, before we write any of the banters, the writers usually sit down and go, okay, well, what characters get along? What characters fight, and maybe what do they fight about? At that point, it's kind of theoretical, and it'll change as we're writing it. So you'll get Varric and Isabella get along great because they're the two rogues, and they agree. Most things, like everybody in the city is crazy. Or Varric and Sebastian don't get along. I think primarily because we thought it was funny. That
it is funny.
They're almost the same guy. Varric is convinced that you are full up on dashing, noble, black sheep of the family, rose archers. You don't need another one.
Yeah.
That slot is filled. So yeah, we'll do a quick sort of sketch of which characters are gonna get along and who's gonna clash and maybe in what ways. So I think we initially decided that Varric was going to get along with just about everybody in DA2, primarily because nobody in DA2 got along.
Yeah.
It's like there's gotta be one at least.
Someone has to go along with it. There's apparently no one else.
Yeah.
And the banters, do you guys write them all together? Are you guys, or do you guys write something and then send it to the other writer? Or?
It's back and forth. So typically, whoever is first into the pool on writing banters will write. Let's say Varric and Anders are supposed to have 20 banters together. I'll write 10 of them, and then I'll pass that over to Jennifer, who's Anders' writer. So I'll give her those. She'll look over the ones that I did and possibly rewrite them if they completely don't match things that Anders would say. And then she'll write the next 10 and she'll send it back to me. And then I'll fix what she's done for voice on my character.
Oh, interesting.
And that's basically how we handle the back and forth.
I see. And when it's two characters that, like, you wrote Meryl as well,
Then
right?
I'll just write both. I'll write.
Did you just write both? I love that relationship, by the way, Meryl and Varric. They're just so adorable. Matt.
Okay.
Bianca, the crossbow.
Yeah.
What was the process like in the concept art? Did you have much to say with the way that it looked?
Actually, no, Bianca was an edge case that would, this is very rarely happened, but Matt Goldman, our art director, just completely fell in love with the idea of Bianca, and I basically wouldn't let us draw anything for it. Well, we did take a couple early swipes, but he just had something in mind, and he ended up just modeling it in 3D and like,
Oh, wow.
how things would work and where all the bits would go, and it looked fantastic. And then Casper Konefeld gave it its beauty pass, all the metals, materials, and designs and decorations. Matt, our art director, just has a real passion for like gadgets and these things that he wants to make sure that they all work and that they fit and that they feel mechanical and chunky. And I think he was getting jealous watching us all draw and paint. He just was getting itchy to do some of it too. And he did the same thing to the Dwarven Weapons in what was it called?
Oh, the
Descent.
Descent.
I was thinking,
Oh, that's cool.
the Descent. So he designed the Dwarven Weapons for that. He just really gets a kick out of doing that.
Awesome.
I actually don't remember if it was him or Mike who came to me and said, "Okay, look, Art is doing this much work on Varric's crossbow. You have to give it a name."
Yeah.
I think it might have been Matt who just came to my office and said, "Okay, we need to give this a name."
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Well, and how did you just choose it? They're like, okay, let's just say Bianca.
So I it was a little bit of a process. Whatever it was, if Varric was going to talk to his crossbow, it had to be something that he could say in combat, while shouting. So it couldn't be like anything terribly complicated or hard.
A bunch of syllables.
So I just started looking at lists of names, and I picked Bianca because it was on a list of Shakespearean names, and
Oh, nice.
it's actually from Taming of the Shrew, which is not my favorite play, but is a framed narrative.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. What about the woman, the actual Bianca? Was her story always there from the beginning, or did you guys end up, because he never talked about it in Dragon Age 2, but he finally talks about it in Dragon Age Inquisition, you meet her. Was it always the way that it was going to be in Inquisition in the beginning, or did it eventually form that way?
I always had a plan for where Bianca got her name from and who inspired it, and I just wouldn't tell any of the writers. I think Cheryl might have pried it out of me. Nobody else knew what it was. And I would drop hints about it periodically. I think I did mention there was a girl, and I made a promise in DA2, and that was it for why he wouldn't tell you the story, where Bianca got her name. And finally, on Inquisition, when I was working on Varric, Dave just had no, you're gonna bring Bianca in.
Oh, that's so cool. This is for John. I've always wondered, since different artistic mediums have their own way of expressing something, like for example, a book to movie, it's almost always different for different reasons. But when you receive the script or storyboard for a scene, are there ever times where you think this isn't going to be possible, either because of engine capabilities or animation limitations?
All the time. So when we get our process, especially as we've learned to trust each other more and more, as I've worked with people more, it's become a lot more collaborative. So very rarely will something get to the point where it's fully done and it's handed off to me, and I'm like, whoa, none of this is possible, because usually we'll have talked about it. And it's a really fun process because it's so collaborative, and because of that, when it does get to me, occasionally I'll be like, I don't know if this is possible, but here's a suggestion that we can do if this doesn't work. So it's a lot of just making sure you always have a plan B, because sometimes even if you know it's possible, you don't have the time, you don't have the resources. So
it's almost like you are working with really pared down theater.
Yes.
The game looks elaborate and beautiful and filled with stuff, but what you're really working with is essentially the black stage with the single prop or the one set thing in the background. And that I think the team is getting better and better at recognizing like it is something so important that it's worth building this thing to bring into it, or having that location, or having that one move for instance that's actually worth selling it. And so you have to think really efficiently and cleanly.
Well, what's nice about that too is I've got my background is film and English. I'm an English degree. And for me, theater was the other one where I did a lot of acting when I was younger. So kind of off of that point, I look at things. I always try to sell something with a look, with a gesture, if I can. I mean, it's sometimes you can't do that, and that's why I like working with our writers so much. Is because our writers also, they think visually. They think storytelling is more than just the words. They think of storytelling as everything that goes into it. And that's why we get such amazing conversations to work with. Like the material, that by the time the material gets to the point where I'm actually putting it into the game, it's gone through so much iteration, so much, and the writers have done such a good job of giving us something we can work with, and it's usually exactly what we need to work with. I think Mary might be able to speak this better than I can, but I think as we got further into DAI, and especially as we got into DLC, the amount of stuff that had to get sent back as, no, we have to make some changes, it becomes less and less, because by the time it gets to that point in the process, we've done so much iteration on it, it's polished as much as we can. So
we bring in usually the cinematic designer who's going to work on a character, and hopefully the level designer who's going to implement them. To the writer peer reviews when the other writers are going to tell me that the stuff I wrote is crap. Also come in and say, and also that plot you wrote we can't build, or the scene.
Oh, I see. So they're on the same level, so they know.
So that we can change it before it gets to the point where now we're handing them the finished conversation. And also, it's great to have the cinematics people come in and say, okay, that entire conversation you wrote, I could replace that with a gesture. Just cut all of that.
Yeah. No more words.
We don't need these words. You can put them in something else.
It's not just us being jerks, it's because we do have very specific budgets for words and for lines. So if I tell Mary that, hey, that conversation of like 10 lines, I can do that with 2 gestures. Those are 10 lines that Mary can use somewhere else, and then more bang for our buck, because as long as whatever makes the best player experience is kind of what we're all looking to do here. So as I started hand talking, I've studied the school of Laidlaw.
And if there's a scene that I think before I write it is going to be challenging for cine design, I will usually ask before I write it, like the card game. I wasn't sure we were going to even get cards. Do we have assets, and can I put that many people in a room around a table?
And that's exactly like everything that's in the game. Like you get nothing for free. It's not like film. It's not like you can't just grab something. Everything in there has to be designed and built and rigged and works according to all the rules. And so got to be either very specific or hopefully
or like Vivian's spa scene, you can reuse the cheese wheels.
Oh my god, I love that.
There's a bug for a while where the cheese wheels weren't attached to the right bone, so Vivian's head would move and the cheese wheels would stay and just go through her head, and it made the whole scene a lot more grotesque.
Did you guys draw on any particular inspiration for Varrick when representing him in each of your fields?
Oh, sure. Yeah, he must be a total pastiche of everybody's influences at this point. I mean, there was, to be honest, the first drawings I did of him, I kind of thought a dwarf doing his best impression of Kevin Costner from Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves.
Oh, perfect.
And then going for Inquisition, it was maybe just a sprig of young Jeff Bridges and a few other things like that, where it's just trying to, I don't know.
Very cool.
I don't know about you guys.
All over the place. I mean, the easy one for me to jump back to is Han Solo, but that's the obvious, that's the easy one. I'd almost say, and around the time I started working at Dragon Age 2, I actually started watching the show Burn Notes, and Bruce Campbell's character I really like. He's a bigger guy, he's bombastic, but he's very much, he's got a very animated personality, animated character, and I really like that kind of. He's a storyteller too. He tells stories about his exploits, and sometimes he's BSing everyone, but for the most part he means well, and it's kind of that action like that, because that almost that heavier but not necessarily clumsy kind of movement from him.
Yeah.
Yeah, He's taken from my uncle.
Really?
Appropriately, the youngest of 5 kids. So the professional younger brother among my uncles. He was a really sweet guy, and he was always telling stories. And so yeah, this is where Varric gets that from.
Aww. That's so cool.
And oddly, I think all of my other uncles are gigantic guys with beards. So
One thing that a lot of people like is that Dragon Age 2 was a narrative, and it was told by Varric. So people were asking me if you, I don't know if you guys could even answer this, if there's even an answer for this, but do you think, since it was a narrative, is Dragon Age 2 how it really happened, or was it exaggerated? Is it lies? Is Hawk just... Did we really not meet the actual Hawk until Dragon Age Inquisition?
I have no authority to speak on this, so what isn't canon, but as far as my experience going through it, I would assume by the end, you maybe saw, and again I'll speak in percentages, you maybe saw 20% of what really happened. Yeah.
I think we would like to leave some doubt.
I like that thought too. I was like, well, we'll never know.
Yeah. What was our running joke in the writers' pit? The Varric was just not very good at description, and that's why all the caves look alike.
Yeah.
Oh my god, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Cave.
Yeah, it's got rocks.
Whatever. Rocks.
It is some
That's how
some
much he's
random.
rejected his Morpheus. He rejected caves too.
Oh, someone was wondering how much control lead writers, or like David Gator, have on the development of characters written by other writers. So, for example, if a lead writer were to decide Varric has to die, would you be able to challenge that? Please do.
I mean, you can make an argument if the story says, okay, Varric needs to shiv a guy in a dark alley or whatever. You can make the argument, I mean, well, I don't think that's gonna work. And you can make a compelling argument for why it shouldn't happen. Maybe. If it's a major plot point, like, you know, Varric needs to be the one to blow up the chantry or something, then you're probably just gonna have to write towards that.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah.
What about Hard and Hightown, the chapters that turn up in the DLCs and you start reading them, and even in the game? Did you write those,
Yes.
Mary, or awesome?
That was my DA week project.
Nice. Awesome.
Okay, so this is the big question. This is for Mary. I'm sure you knew this was coming. Did a player character romance possibility ever cross your mind, or have you always seen him as the loyal best friend, or was this ever presented to you as a possibility and you didn't think it would fit Varric's background?
Yeah, come on.
Okay, well, DA2, like I said, we got the list of characters at the start. Which ones were romances was already picked off the list before anybody was written. We didn't have art, we didn't have voice actors, we had no words written. It was just, okay, these 4, go! That was
Oh.
So he wasn't on the list at that point.
There was never an option.
Yeah. For Inquisition, it did come up because we were bringing him back. It's very popular. But I felt like he was in a really dark place for Inquisition.
Mm-hmm.
He was so depressed. And in fact, I made myself depressed right for this conversation. Like, it's bad. So it didn't feel like that was a good point to start a relationship while he's blaming himself for dooming the world.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting too because the characters of like Hawk is such an underdog, the rags to riches story. That's the story that Varric loves to tell. Whereas you're something that is the Chantry's eventually going to write about. So why would I bother? It almost doesn't seem, especially at the start, like you particularly are that fascinating.
Yeah.
I wanted to do a romance with Hawk in the expansion if we had gotten to do it, and then the expansion.
Aww.
I
So
remember doing storyboards for those.
Really? So this was actually.
But there were some alternate history things that got storyboarded that will never see the light of day, likely.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if you got my tweet, Mary. I'm gonna let you guys go. I don't want to hold you guys for too long, but I don't know if you got my tweet, but people are asking for a Varric nickname for me.
Okay, well, following the rules of Varric's nicknames, it's either got to be a trait that you have that he thinks will annoy you, that is completely not descriptive of you, that he thinks will annoy you. So I'm going to go with Grimdark. There you go.
Grimdark, I love it. Oh man, I'm like tempted to change my username now. Okay, I'm gonna let you guys go. I know you guys are in at work, and I appreciate so much that you guys took the time to do this. It was an absolute pleasure. And yeah, from my subscribers as well, they say thank you for answering their questions also.
No problem.
Cool, it was fun.
It was fun, yeah.
It's kind of fun to be this self-indulgent sometimes.
Yes. I don't get to do these types of things without
Yeah.
a very specific list of things we can talk about.
Awesome. Okay, so thank you so much for you guys' questions, and yeah, thank you so much for watching, and I will talk to you guys later.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.